The auction hall was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceiling, casting warm light over rows of velvet chairs filled with wealthy bidders in designer suits and silk dresses. At the front of the room stood my husband, Victor, behind a mahogany podium, looking every bit the grieving spouse in his black Armani suit. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice carried that practiced tone of sorrow he'd perfected over the past 8 months. "Thank you for coming today. As you know, this auction is not something I ever imagined I'd have to do." He paused, letting his eyes glisten. Someone in the front row murmured sympathetically. "My wife, Elena, suffered a catastrophic accident last year. The doctors say she's in a persistent vegetative state. She doesn't know who I am. She doesn't know where she is. For all intents and purposes, the woman I married is gone." I sat in the corner of that glittering room, slumped in a battered wheelchair that squeaked when it moved. My head lolled to one side. Drool collected at the corner of my mouth. My eyes stared at nothing, glazed and empty, but I heard every single word. "The medical bills have been astronomical," Victor continued, his voice cracking on cue. "I've depleted our savings trying every treatment, every specialist. This estate, our home for 15 years, is all I have left to sell. The proceeds will go toward her long-term care facility." Liar. The facility he'd moved me to cost $800 a month. It smelled like mildew and neglect. The nurses were overworked and underpaid. My room had a broken window that let in rain. Beside him, Carla stood in a tight black dress that was completely inappropriate for the occasion. She touched his arm, playing the role of supportive friend, but I'd heard them in my hospital room at the facility just last week. "Once this sells, we can finally go to Santorini like you promised," she'd whispered, running her manicured nails down his chest while I sat 5 feet away, supposedly brain dead. "Lot number 1, Victor announced, his voice stronger now, excited. "The Wellington estate, 5 bedrooms, 4 baths, Olympic pool, tennis courts, built in 1895, fully restored. We'll start the bidding at $2.5 million. Paddles rose around the room. $3 million, 3.2, 3.5. Victor's eyes sparkled. He wasn't even pretending to be sad anymore. This was his moment of triumph. He'd gotten away with it. He'd reduced me to a worthless object, stolen my voice, my agency, my entire life, and now he was cashing in. $4 million, called a woman in the third row. 4.2, countered a man near the back, going once at 4.2 million. My right hand, hidden beneath the ratty blanket across my lap, closed around the wheel of my chair. My fingers, weak but functional after months of secret nighttime therapy, gripped the rubber. "I going twice?" I pressed my feet flat against the footrests. My legs trembled. Maria, the night nurse who'd saved my life, had warned me this would hurt. She was right. Every muscle screamed. Victor raised the gavel, grinning at Carla. "Sold to?" I stood up. The wheelchair rolled backward with a metallic screech that cut through the room like a knife. 150 pairs of eyes turned toward me. The woman in the third row gasped. A man dropped his paddle. Victor's face went white. The gavel slipped from his fingers and clattered on the podium. I took one step, then another. My legs shook violently, but I'd practiced this. 3 in the morning, every morning, shuffling up and down the hallway while the orderlies slept. I knew how to walk again. Carla made a choking sound and stumbled backward, nearly falling off the stage. The room was dead silent except for the click of my footsteps. I walked slowly, deliberately, down the center aisle. People pulled their chairs back, creating a path. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Victor's mouth opened and closed like a dying fish. "Elena, you can't." I reached the podium. Up close, I could see the sweat beading on his forehead, the panic in his eyes. I took the microphone from his frozen hand. When I spoke, my voice was hoarse from months of disuse, but every word was clear. "The only vegetable in this room, Victor, is your brain if you think you're keeping my money." It started with champagne and starlight. 15 months ago, Victor and I were celebrating our anniversary at Marcello's, the Italian restaurant where he'd proposed 10 years earlier. He ordered the Dom Perignon, the one we saved for special occasions. He held my hand across the candlelit table and told me I was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. I believed him. "Let's drive up the coast tomorrow," he said, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. "Just you and me, like we used to do before life got so busy." I should have questioned why he was suddenly so romantic. We'd been distant for months. He worked late constantly. He smelled like perfume that wasn't mine. But I wanted to believe we were fixing things, that our marriage still meant something. The next morning, we took my car, the vintage Mercedes my father had given me. Victor insisted on driving. He said I'd been working too hard, that I should relax and enjoy the scenery. I remember the cliff road, the ocean sparkling below, Victor's hands on the steering wheel, his jaw tight. I remember thinking it was strange that he wasn't talking. Usually, he filled silences with chatter about work, about the neighbors, about anything. But that morning, he just drove, his eyes fixed ahead. Then I saw his hand move to his seatbelt. He unbuckled it. "Victor, what are you—" He yanked the wheel hard to the right. The world exploded into spinning sky and screaming metal. The guardrail shattered like matchsticks. For 3 endless seconds, we were airborne. I saw the rocks below rushing up to meet us. The impact was catastrophic. I woke up 6 days later in County General Hospital, but I didn't wake up. Not really. I could hear the machines beeping. I could feel the tube down my throat. I could sense the harsh fluorescent lights through my closed eyelids, but I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even blink. Locked-in syndrome. The doctors called it later, though they didn't know it at the time. A rare condition where the mind remains fully conscious but the body becomes a prison. I could hear everything. I understood everything. But to everyone looking at me, I was gone. "Mrs. Wellington, can you hear me?" A doctor's voice, professional and distant. "Squeeze my hand if you can hear me." I screamed internally. I begged my fingers to move. Nothing happened. "No response," the doctor said. I heard him writing on a clipboard. "Persistent vegetative state. Likely permanent given the severity of the brainstem trauma." Then I heard Victor's voice, and it was different from any tone I'd ever heard from him before. It was flat, cold, relieved. "So she's gone. I mean, she's not coming back." "I'm very sorry, Mr. Wellington. The scans show minimal brain activity. Even if she regains consciousness, which is highly unlikely, she would have severe cognitive impairments. What about treatment? Is there anything that might help?" The doctor paused. I could almost hear him choosing his words carefully. "There are aggressive rehabilitation programs. Intensive physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy. They're expensive and the success rate is low, but there have been cases of partial recovery." "How expensive?" "For the level of care she'd need, probably $15,000 to $20,000 a month. For at least a year, possibly longer." Silence. Then Victor spoke, and his voice was the voice of a stranger. "No, I don't think that's worth it. If she's not really there anymore, what's the point?" My heart broke in that moment, though the monitor beside me registered no change. "Are you certain, Mr. Wellington? I understand this is difficult, but—" "I'm certain. Just keep her comfortable. Pain management, basic care, nothing extreme." "I see. Well, once she's stable, we'll need to transfer her to a long-term care facility. I can recommend several excellent. Just find somewhere affordable." "I'll handle it." The doctor left. I heard the door close. Then I felt Victor's presence beside my bed. He leaned close, and I smelled his cologne, the same scent I'd loved for a decade. "I'm sorry, Elena," he whispered. "But you were going to leave me anyway. I found the divorce papers in your desk. This way is cleaner. You can't take half of everything if you're not really here." My mind screamed. The divorce papers were a draft, something I'd considered during our rough patch but never filed. I'd decided to stay, to try, to fight for us, and he'd tried to kill me for it. Over the next 2 weeks, I remained in County General while Victor handled the paperwork. I heard nurses discussing my case during shift changes, their voices sympathetic but detached. The tragic young woman, the grieving husband. Such a shame. If only they knew. Carla appeared on day 9. I didn't know who she was then. Just a woman's voice with a slight rasp, like she smoked too much. Oh, Victor, I'm so sorry about your wife. Her tone was syrupy, false. This must be so hard for you. It's been a nightmare, Victor said. He was standing at the foot of my bed. I could feel his presence like a cold shadow. But I'm managing. You're so strong. Most men would fall apart. I have to stay strong. For her. Liar. 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 Have you eaten today? You need to take care of yourself. I haven't had much appetite. Come on. There's a cafe downstairs. My treat. They left. I heard Carla's heels clicking on the linoleum, growing fainter. Then I heard something else, just before the door closed completely. Victor laughing. The transfer happened on a Thursday. 2 EMTs loaded me into an ambulance that smelled like disinfectant and old coffee. No one explained where we were going. Victor didn't come. He sent his assistant with a folder of signed papers. Riverside Extended Care Facility was a nightmare dressed up as a medical center. The building was a converted motel from the 1960s, all cracked stucco and barred windows. My room was 10 feet by 10 feet, with a twin bed, a plastic chair, and a television that only played static. The nurse who checked me in was bored and rough. She transferred me from the gurney to the bed without supporting my head. My skull cracked against the metal frame. She didn't apologize. Family visit hours are Wednesdays and Saturdays, 2 to 4, she said to no one in particular. Meals at 8, noon, and 5. If she needs anything, press the call button. I couldn't press anything. I couldn't do anything but lie there and listen to the woman in the next room screaming for her daughter who never came. Victor visited 3 days later. He brought Carla. I heard them before I saw them. Carla was laughing. That artificial tinkling sound. God, this place is depressing. How long do we have to stay? 20 minutes, tops. Just long enough for me to sign the visitor log. Looks better if I come regularly. They entered my room. Victor pulled the plastic chair close to my bed and sat down heavily. Carla leaned against the wall, examining her nails. Hey, Elena, Victor said, his voice loud and patronizing, like he was talking to a child. How are you feeling today? The nurses treating you okay? I stared at the ceiling. A water stain in the corner looked like a skull. She looks worse, Carla observed. Did she lose weight? Probably. The food here is terrible. Victor pulled out his phone and started scrolling. I brought your mail, Elena. Mostly bills. Don't worry, I'm handling everything. He wasn't handling anything. He was stealing everything. Oh, look at this. He held up an envelope. Your jewelry insurance renewal? $15,000 a year? That's ridiculous. I'm canceling it. Why? Carla asked. She's got some nice pieces. Had? Past tense? I'm selling them. My grandmother's emerald ring, my mother's pearl necklace, the diamond earrings Victor had given me on our 5th anniversary, when he still pretended to love me. Seriously? How much are they worth? Appraiser said maybe $200,000 for the whole collection. Carla whistled. Not bad. What else are you selling? The cars, the beach house, some of the art. I'll keep the estate until the market improves, then sell that too. And she can't stop you. Victor reached out and picked up my hand. It was limp, lifeless. He dropped it back on the bed like a piece of meat. She can't do anything. She's a vegetable, remember? Legally. I have full power of attorney. Everything she owned is mine now. What about her family? Won't they ask questions? She doesn't have family. Parents are dead. Only child. Her friends stopped calling months ago. Nobody cares about Elena Wellington anymore. They stayed for exactly 23 minutes. I counted every second. Before they left, Victor leaned down and kissed my forehead. His lips were cold. Sleep well, he whispered. Then, to Carla, let's get out of here. This place smells like death. After they left, I cried. No tears fell because my tear ducts didn't work. But inside, I wept. Not for the money or the jewelry or even the betrayal. I cried because I'd loved him. I'd trusted him with everything. And he'd destroyed me without a second thought. That night, Maria found me. She was the night shift nurse, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and careful hands. She came in to check my vitals at 11 p.m. and noticed something the others hadn't. "Mija," she whispered, "your heart rate just spiked. Can you hear me?" I couldn't respond, but my heart rate spiked again. Maria moved closer. "Listen to me carefully. If you can understand what I'm saying, try to change your breathing. Just a little. Anything." I focused every particle of my consciousness on my lungs. Breathe faster. Breathe faster. Come on. My breathing quickened, just slightly. Maria's eyes widened. She looked at the monitor, then back at me. "Dios mío, you're in there, aren't you?" If I could have sobbed, I would have... Okay, we're going to fix this." She pulled up the chair and took my hand gently. My sister had locked-in syndrome after a stroke. I know what this is. I know you can hear me. And I promise you, Mija, I'm going to help you get out. Maria became my lifeline, my only connection to hope in that place of despair. She started small. The first night, after discovering I was conscious, she simply talked to me. She told me about her life, her 3 children, her husband who'd died of cancer 2 years ago. She told me about her sister, Carmen, who'd been trapped in her own body for 6 months before slowly, painfully, learning to communicate again. Carmen started with her eyelids, Maria said, adjusting my pillow with gentle hands. The doctors said it was impossible, but she proved them wrong. She blinked once for yes, twice for no. It took her 3 months to move a finger, 6 months to wiggle her toes. A year before she could write her name. She paused, and I felt her looking at me. "But she did it, Mija. She's home now, living her life. And you're going to do it too." The second night, Maria brought a small pen light. "I'm going to test something. If you can control anything, even the smallest movement, we need to find it." She spent an hour testing every part of my body. My toes, my fingers, my jaw, my eyelids. Nothing responded. I was still a prisoner. But on the third night, something changed. Maria was reading to me from a mystery novel when she mentioned Victor's name in passing, something she'd overheard from the day shift nurses. "That husband of yours came by today. Signed some papers at the front desk." I felt it then, a surge of rage so intense it felt like fire in my veins. And with that rage came the smallest, most miraculous sensation. My right index finger twitched. It was barely perceptible, just a tiny flutter of muscle. But Maria saw it. She dropped the book and grabbed my hand. Elena, did you move your finger?" I tried again. "Come on, move. Another twitch, stronger this time." Maria laughed, and I heard tears in her voice. Oh my God, you did it." "Okay, listen to me. I'm going to say 2 things. If the answer is yes, try to move your finger. If it's no, do nothing. Understand?" I twitched my finger. "Is your name Elena?" Twitch. "Is today Wednesday?" It was Saturday. I did nothing. "Can you hear everything I say?" Twitch. Maria squeezed my hand carefully. "We're going to get you out of this, Mija, but we have to be smart. If your husband finds out you're recovering, what do you think he'll do?" I knew exactly what he'd do. He'd finish what he started on that cliff road. I did nothing, but Maria understood anyway. That's what I thought. So this stays between us. Nobody else can know. Not the day shift, not the doctors, and definitely not him. Over the next 2 months, Maria and I worked in secret. She came every night at 11 after the other patients were asleep and the skeleton crew was occupied with paperwork. She'd lock my door, draw the curtains, and we'd begin. "Occupational therapy starts with the extremities," she explained during week 1. "We'll work on your fingers first, then your hands, then your arms. It's going to hurt, Elena. Your muscles have atrophied, but pain means healing." She was right about the pain. Every night, she'd massage my fingers, bending them slowly, forcing blood into the dormant tissue. It felt like needles made of ice and fire. Sometimes I wanted to scream, but I couldn't, so I focused on the anger instead. I thought about Victor's face when he dropped my hand like garbage. I thought about Carla's laughter. I thought about my grandmother's ring being sold to a stranger. The anger became fuel. By week 3, I could move all 5 fingers on my right hand. By week 5, I could curl my hand into a fist. "You're doing amazing," Maria whispered one night, tears streaming down her face. Carmen took 4 months to get this far. But we couldn't celebrate. Every day shift, I had to remain completely still, a vegetable in a bed, while nurses changed my sheets and orderlies brought food I couldn't eat. The charade was exhausting, but necessary. Victor visited every Wednesday like clockwork, always with Carla, always for exactly 20 minutes. They treated my room like a storage closet where they could speak freely. Week 6, Wednesday afternoon. I heard them before they opened the door. Carla was complaining about something. "I don't understand why we have to keep coming here. She's not going anywhere." "Appearances matter," Victor said. "The lawyer said I need to show regular visitation for the power of attorney to remain unchallenged." They walked in. Victor sat in his usual spot. Carla leaned against the wall, and I stared at the ceiling. "Big news, Elena," Victor said, pulling papers from his briefcase. "I sold the beach house. Got $900,000 for it. Not bad for a property we only paid $600 for. Our beach house, where we'd spent our honeymoon, where I'd scattered my mother's ashes in the garden." "What are you going to do with the money?" Carla asked. "Invest some of it. The rest goes into our travel fund." He reached over and patted my shoulder. "Don't worry, I'm keeping enough aside for your care here. $800 a month is very reasonable." My right hand, hidden beneath the blanket, curled into a fist. I wanted to grab his throat. I wanted to watch him choke. But Maria's voice echoed in my head. "Not yet. You're not strong enough yet." "When are you going to sell the estate?" Carla asked. "Soon. I'm waiting for the appraisal to come back. Should be worth at least $4 million in this market." "And then we're free?" Victor stood up and pulled Carla close. Right there, 3 feet from my supposedly comatose body, he kissed her, deep and long and possessive. "Then we're free," he confirmed. "I'm thinking we start in Greece, Santorini, like you wanted, then maybe Italy, France, Spain. We'll take a year, see the world, spend Elena's money." They laughed together. They actually laughed. After they left, I lay there shaking with rage. Maria found me that night with my heart rate at 120. "Mija, what happened?" I couldn't tell her, but she saw it in my vital signs. She held my hand and let me be angry. "Channel it," she said quietly. "Use it. Every bit of rage, every moment of humiliation, turn it into strength. Because when you stand up, when you face him, you need to be stronger than he ever thought possible." That night, we started working on my legs. The process was agony. My muscles had deteriorated so much that even the smallest movement felt impossible. Maria would lift my leg, bend my knee, rotate my ankle, and every nerve would scream in protest. "5 more, Elena. You can do 5 more." I couldn't. I wanted to quit. I wanted to give up and stay in this bed forever. Then I thought about Victor selling my mother's pearls. I thought about Carla wearing my clothes, sleeping in my bed, living my life. I did 5 more. Week 9, I could bend my knees. Week 10, I could flex my ankles. Week 12, I could hold my legs straight. "Tonight, we try standing," Maria announced. It was 3 a.m, the deadest part of the night. She'd brought a walker from the supply closet. "I'm going to lift you up. Your legs are going to buckle, but I've got you. Just try to hold your weight for 5 seconds. That's all." She positioned the walker in front of me and gently pulled me to a sitting position. My head spun. I hadn't been upright in months. Deep breaths. Let the blood redistribute. Take your time. When the dizziness passed, she helped me stand. My legs trembled violently. They felt like water, like they might dissolve under me at any second. 4 seconds, Elena. 3, 2, 1. I collapsed back onto the bed, gasping soundlessly. "That was perfect," Maria said, but I could hear the worry in her voice. "We'll try again tomorrow, and the next night, and the next, until your legs remember what they're supposed to do." It took 3 weeks before I could stand for a full minute, 4 weeks before I could take a step, 5 weeks before I could walk the length of my room. We practiced every night at 3 a.m. Maria would lock the door, help me out of bed, and I'd shuffle back and forth across the small space, gripping the walker, my whole body shaking with effort. Faster, Maria urged during week 17. You need to build endurance. When you confront him, you can't look weak. I pushed harder. 10 steps became 20. 20 became 50. My muscles burned, but I didn't stop. During the day, I remained motionless. The day shift nurses had no idea that their vegetative patient was relearning to walk while they slept. Nobody suspected. Nobody looked closely enough to see. Except once. Week 18, a Wednesday. Victor's scheduled visit. But this time, he came alone. He pulled the chair close and sat down with a heavy sigh. Carla couldn't make it today. She's at the spa, spending more of your money. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He took my hand. You know, Elena, sometimes I almost feel guilty. We had some good years, didn't we, before everything went wrong? I wanted to scream at him. We had 15 good years until you decided to murder me for money. But you were going to leave me. I saw the papers. You were going to take half of everything I'd worked for. Everything he'd worked for? I'd built my fortune before we even met. My father's inheritance, my investments, my real estate portfolio. Victor had been a mid-level accountant when I married him. I'd made him rich. So really, this is your fault. If you'd just stayed loyal, if you'd just been a good wife, none of this would have happened. He was rewriting history, convincing himself he was the victim. Anyway, I came to tell you that the estate appraisal came back, $4.2 million. I'm scheduling the auction for next month. Should be quite the event. All our old friends, our society contacts, everyone who used to kiss up to you when you had power. He leaned closer, and I could smell whiskey on his breath. And you'll be there, Elena. In your wheelchair, in the corner, a reminder of how fragile life is. It'll make me look noble, keeping you close even in your diminished state, the devoted husband who refuses to abandon his wife. He stood up, straightening his jacket. The irony is beautiful, don't you think? You'll watch me sell everything you loved, take everything you built, and you won't be able to do a damn thing about it. He patted my head like I was a dog. See you next week. After he left, I felt something wet on my cheek. Somehow, impossibly, a tear had escaped. Just one, rolling down toward my ear. That night, when Maria came, I moved my arm, actually lifted it off the bed and reached for her hand. She gasped. Elena, your arm. I gripped her fingers, not strong, but deliberate. You heard something today, didn't you? Something that pushed you. I squeezed her hand once. Yes. Maria sat down heavily. What do you want to do? I couldn't speak, but I moved my other hand to my throat, then pointed toward the door. The message was clear. I want to talk. I want to tell. Not yet, Maria said gently. You're not ready. You can barely walk 10 feet. If you try to expose him now, he'll claim you're confused, brain damaged. He'll have you declared incompetent and ship you somewhere even worse than this. She was right. I knew she was right, but the rage was consuming me. Listen to me. He's having an auction. Yes? I squeezed once. When? I held up fingers. One, then a fist, then another finger. 30 days. 1 month. Okay. That's actually perfect. We have 1 month to get you strong enough to walk into that auction and destroy him. She pulled out her phone and made a call. It was 3:30 in the morning, but whoever she called answered. Roberto, it's Maria. I need a favor. Remember that lawyer you know, the one who helped Carmen with her disability case? I need his number. No, it's not for me. It's for a patient. She glanced at me. A patient who's about to come back from the dead. The lawyer's name was Thomas Brennan, and he arrived at Riverside Extended Care on a Sunday morning when the facility was operating with minimal staff. Maria had arranged it perfectly. She told the front desk he was my distant cousin, visiting from out of state. He was a man in his 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Maria brought him to my room and locked the door behind them. Mrs. Wellington, he said, pulling the plastic chair close to my bed. Maria tells me you've been conscious this entire time, that your husband attempted to murder you and is now liquidating your assets under fraudulent pretenses. I blinked once. Yes. Can you move anything besides your eyelids? I slowly, painfully, lifted my right hand off the bed, then my left. Then I bent my knee beneath the blanket. Brennan's expression remained neutral, but I saw his jaw tighten. How long have you been able to do this? Maria answered for me. She's been recovering for about 4 months. She can walk now, short distances. She can't speak yet, but she's working on it. Can you write? Maria handed me a pen and a notepad. My hand shook violently as I gripped the pen. The letters came out jagged and barely legible, but I managed to scrawl, "He tried to kill me." Brennan photographed the note with his phone. Mrs. Wellington, I need you to understand something. What you're describing is attempted murder, fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy. These are serious criminal charges, but proving them will be difficult. I wrote again. Auction. 1 month. He's selling your estate in 1 month. I blinked once. Brennan was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then he smiled, and it was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator who'd just spotted prey. And Maria told me he's planning to have you at the auction. Is that correct? Blink. As a prop, to make himself look sympathetic. Blink. Then that's where we take him down, publicly, irrevocably, in front of witnesses who can't be silenced or bribed. He leaned forward. But for this to work, you need to be able to walk into that room and speak. Can you do that in 30 days? I didn't blink. Yes, I didn't blink no. Instead, I threw the blanket off my legs, gripped the bed rail, and pulled myself into a sitting position. My legs swung over the side. Maria rushed to support me, but I waved her off. I stood up. My legs trembled. My vision blurred. Every muscle in my body screamed. But I stood on my own, without the walker, for 15 full seconds before collapsing back onto the bed. Brennan nodded slowly. I'll take that as a yes. All right, Mrs. Wellington. Here's what we're going to do. He spent the next hour outlining the plan. He would quietly file paperwork to contest the power of attorney, but he wouldn't submit it to the court yet. He would attend the auction as a registered bidder, just another wealthy buyer, someone Victor wouldn't notice. Maria would install small security cameras in my room to document any visits from Victor or Carla. And I would continue to play dead until the perfect moment. On the hardest part, Brennan said, is that you'll have to let him continue. Let him sell your possessions. Let him plan his future with that woman. Let him believe he's won, because the bigger his triumph, the harder his fall. After he left, Maria helped me back into bed. Are you sure about this, Mija? It's going to get worse before it gets better. I picked up the pen and wrote, good. I wanted it to get worse. I wanted Victor to sink deeper into his lies. I wanted him to feel invincible, because the higher he climbed, the more satisfying it would be to watch him crash. The torture began that same week. I started small. On Wednesday, when Victor came for his regular visit, I waited until he turned his back to me. Then I moved. Just my hand, lifting off the bed a few inches before settling back down. He didn't see it, but Carla did. She was leaning against the wall, scrolling through her phone, when she glanced up. Her eyes widened. Victor, what? Her hand, it moved. Victor turned to look at me. I was perfectly still, staring at the ceiling, drool collecting at the corner of my mouth. You're seeing things. I swear I saw her hand move. She's a vegetable, Carla. Vegetables don't move. He grabbed my wrist and lifted my arm, then let it drop. It fell like dead weight. See? Nothing. But Carla kept staring at me, uncertain. The next Wednesday, I did it again. This time, I turned my head. Just a fraction of an inch, just enough that when Carla looked over, my eyes were pointed in a slightly different direction than they'd been before. Victor, I'm serious. Something's wrong with her. Nothing is wrong with her except that she's brain dead. Stop being paranoid. Maybe we should tell the doctor. Tell the doctor what? That you think a vegetative patient moved her head a quarter inch. They'll laugh at you. But I could hear the edge in his voice. The smallest seed of doubt. I watered that seed carefully. Week 22. Victor brought a notary to my room, a greasy man with a briefcase who looked like he'd done questionable work before. "This is the final transfer of deed," Victor explained to the notary. "Once we have her fingerprint on this document, the estate is legally mine to sell." The notary set up his papers on the rolling tray table. "I'll need to verify that she's incapable of signing her name. Trust me, she's incapable of everything." The notary pulled out an ink pad. "If you could just press her thumb here, Mr. Wellington." Victor grabbed my right hand and pressed my thumb to the ink pad, then moved it toward the paper. I tensed every muscle in my hand, made it rigid, unbending. What the hell? Victor tried to force my thumb down. It wouldn't move. "Is there a problem?" the notary asked. "Her hand is stiff. She won't. It's like rigor mortis or something." "That's unusual for a living patient." Victor was sweating now. He grabbed my wrist with both hands and tried to force my thumb onto the paper. I resisted with every ounce of strength I'd built over months of secret therapy. "Maybe she's having a muscular seizure," the notary suggested. "We should call a nurse." "No," Victor snapped. Then, calmer. "No, I'm sure it's fine. It's just muscle tension. Let me try again." He wrenched my hand violently. Pain shot up my arm, but I didn't let the tension release. Finally, after 3 tries, he managed to force my thumb onto the paper, but the fingerprint was smudged and unclear. The notary frowned. "Mr. Wellington, I'm not comfortable certifying this. The patient appeared to be resisting." "She's a vegetable. She doesn't resist anything. She probably just had a spasm." "Nevertheless, I think we should have a medical professional confirm her condition before I'll pay you double your fee." The notary looked at Victor, then at the smudged fingerprint, then at me. "Triple," Victor said. The notary stamped the document. After they left, I allowed myself a small, invisible smile. I had the entire interaction on camera. Maria's hidden recording devices had captured everything, including Victor's bribe. But I wasn't done. Week 23. Victor came alone, late at night. He was drunk. I could smell the whiskey from across the room. "You know what I realized today, Elena?" He slumped in the chair, his words slurring together. "I actually miss you. Not this version of you, obviously, but the old you. The woman who used to laugh at my jokes and make me feel like I was worth something." He was quiet for a moment. "When did you stop loving me? Was it gradual, or was there a specific moment when you looked at me and realized I wasn't enough?" I wanted to tell him the truth. I never stopped loving you. You stopped loving yourself, and that made you hate me for seeing it. "The divorce papers," he continued. "They said irreconcilable differences, so clinical, so cold. You were going to throw away 15 years like it meant nothing. I had the pen Maria left me tucked under my blanket. Slowly, carefully, I pulled it out. My hand was visible in my peripheral vision, but Victor was staring at the wall. I threw the pen. It was a weak throw, barely more than a toss, but it clattered against the wall next to his head. Victor jumped up so fast the chair fell backward. "What the—" He spun around, looking for the source of the noise. His eyes landed on the pen on the floor, then moved to me. I was perfectly still, but my hand was now outside the blanket, resting on my stomach. "That pen wasn't there before," he muttered. "I would have seen it." He picked it up, turned it over in his hands. Then he looked at me again, and I saw something I'd been waiting for. "Fear? You can't move," he said, but he didn't sound convinced anymore. "You can't." The doctors confirmed it. I stared at the ceiling, motionless. Victor backed toward the door, the pen still in his hand. "I'm losing my mind. That's what's happening. I'm going crazy." He left without his usual goodbye. I heard his footsteps running down the hallway. Maria came in an hour later and found me sitting up in bed, grinning soundlessly. "What did you do?" she asked, laughing. I pointed to the camera. She'd see it all on the recording. "You're torturing him." I nodded. Damn right I was. Week 24. Carla came alone, which was unusual. She was carrying a coffee and wearing sunglasses even though it was evening. When she took them off, I saw the bruise under her left eye. Victor doesn't know I'm here, she said, sitting in the chair but not looking at me. We had a fight. He's been acting crazy lately. Paranoid. He thinks you're haunting him. She laughed, but it was hollow. I told him he's being ridiculous. You're practically a corpse. But he swears you're moving when he's not looking. He says things aren't where he left them. He thinks you're watching him. I was watching him. Through the cameras Maria had installed. Through the social media accounts I'd had Brennan monitor. Through the financial records he was too arrogant to hide well. I saw everything. I don't know why I'm telling you this. You can't hear me anyway. Carla pulled out her phone and started scrolling. The auction is in 6 days. After that, we're leaving the country. Victor already booked the flights. We're going to Greece, then disappearing for a while. She stood up to leave, and as she walked past my bed, I moved my eyes. Just my eyes, tracking her movement. She felt it. I know she did, because she stopped mid-step and slowly turned around. I was staring straight ahead again, blank and empty. I'm going insane too, she whispered. That night, Maria told me Carla had stopped by the nurse's station on her way out and asked if there was any chance I could be conscious. The nurse on duty had laughed and said no, my condition was irreversible. But she looked terrified, Maria said, like she'd seen a ghost. Good, I tried to say, but it came out as a strangled rasp. My voice was coming back, slowly. The vocal cords were damaged but healing. Maria gripped my hand. 6 days, mija. Are you ready? I pulled myself out of bed and stood without assistance. Then I took 1 step, 2, 3. I walked the length of the room and back. I'll take that as a yes. Week 25, 3 days before the auction. Victor came with a wheelchair, a newer one than the facility provided. Big day on Saturday, he said cheerfully, the fear from the previous weeks apparently forgotten, or buried. I got you this nice chair for the event. Can't have you looking shabby in front of all those rich people. He transferred me roughly from the bed to the wheelchair. The metal was cold against my back. Carla's getting her hair done, new dress, new shoes. She wants to look perfect for our last public appearance as, well, you know. As what? His mistress? His future wife? My replacement? I was thinking about what I'll say if anyone asks about you. I'll tell them you're comfortable here, that you're getting excellent care, that I visit every week like a devoted husband should. He wheeled me over to the window. It was a gray day, rain streaking down the glass. The truth is, Elena, I think this worked out better than a divorce would have. You don't get to be angry or hurt or vindictive. You don't get to take half of everything out of spite. You just get to exist quietly until you eventually fade away. He leaned down close to my ear. And I get to live the life I always wanted, with the money I deserve, with a woman who actually appreciates me. I felt my jaw clench, my hands curl into fists. Victor didn't notice. He was too busy admiring his reflection in the window. See you Saturday, sweetheart. It's going to be a beautiful event. After he left, I practiced my voice in the empty room. The sounds were raspy and broken, but words were forming. Liar, I croaked. Thief, murderer. Maria came in and found me standing at the window, gripping the frame, forming words. How's it coming? I turned to face her. My voice was rough as sandpaper, barely above a whisper, but it was mine. I'm ready? Maria smiled. Then let's finish this. We spent the next 3 days in intensive preparation. She brought me real clothes to practice walking in. Not hospital gowns. She brought makeup to cover the pallor of my skin. She brought protein shakes to put strength back into my muscles. And she brought a red dress. When you stand up in that auction, she said, hanging it in my closet, you need to look like you rose from the dead, like a phoenix, like something he can't possibly deny or dismiss. The dress was perfect. Blood red, elegant, powerful. The night before the auction, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the wheelchair Maria had positioned in my room, the same chair Victor would wheel me into that hall tomorrow, and I practiced my words. The only vegetable in this room is your brain if you think you're keeping my money. Again. The only vegetable in this room is your brain if you think you're keeping my money. And again. By dawn, my voice was steady. Rough, but steady. Maria found me at 6 a.m., still in the chair, still practicing. It's time, mija. I looked at her, this woman who'd saved my life when no one else even knew I needed saving. Thank you, I said, and the words came out clear. She hugged me tightly. Go make him pay. The auction hall was exactly as magnificent as I remembered from that first glimpse in my mind's eye. The Grandview Estate and Auction House had been the site of dozens of high society events over the years. I'd attended charity galas here, art auctions, fundraisers. Now it was hosting the liquidation of my own life. Victor arrived at Riverside Extended Care at noon, 2 hours before the auction start time. He was wearing his most expensive suit, the charcoal Tom Ford I'd bought him for his 40th birthday. Carla stood beside him in a black cocktail dress that was far too provocative for the occasion, her hair styled in elaborate waves. Ready for your big debut? Victor said cheerfully, wheeling the new chair into my room. I was in bed, dressed in the old hospital gown, my hair unwashed and tangled, exactly as I'd been for months. Maria had helped me stage it perfectly. The red dress was hidden in a garment bag in her locker. The makeup was tucked in her purse. Brennan had the documentation ready in his briefcase. The trap was set. Victor and an orderly transferred me to the wheelchair. My body was limp, cooperative. I let my head loll to one side, drool collecting at the corner of my mouth. God, she looks awful, Carla muttered. Are you sure you want her there? Absolutely. The optics are perfect. Devoted husband, tragic wife, necessary sacrifice. It's a beautiful narrative. They wheeled me out to Victor's Mercedes, the one he'd bought with money from selling my jewelry. The orderly helped load me into the back seat, arranging my limbs like I was a mannequin. During the drive, Victor and Carla talked as if I wasn't there. How many people confirmed? Carla asked. Over 200. Every major collector in the state, plus some from New York and California. The estate alone should bring in $4 million. Maybe more if there's a bidding war. And the art collection? Another $1 million, easily. The Rothko I bought her for our 10th anniversary is worth $500,000 by itself. He'd told me it was an investment in our future. He'd said it would hang in our home forever, a symbol of our enduring love. What time is our flight tomorrow? Carla asked. 6 a.m. By tomorrow night, we'll be in Santorini, drinking wine on a balcony overlooking the Aegean Sea. With $4 million. 5, after the art and furnishings sell, maybe 6. They laughed together, the sound grating against my ears like broken glass. We arrived at the auction house at 1:30. A valet opened the car door, and Victor made a show of carefully extracting me from the back seat, cradling me like a fragile doll. Easy does it, sweetheart, he said loudly, for the benefit of the valets and arriving guests. I've got you. He placed me in the wheelchair and arranged a blanket over my lap. Then he wheeled me through the side entrance, away from the main doors where the bidders were arriving. We'll keep you in the back until the estate lot comes up, Victor explained to no one in particular. Then we'll bring you out for the emotional impact. He parked me in a small holding room off the main hall. Through the doorway, I could see the auction floor filling with people, women in designer dresses, men in tailored suits, all clutching paddles and programs, excited to purchase pieces of my dismantled life. I recognized so many faces. Margaret Hartwell, who'd been in my book club. David Chen, who'd invested in my first real estate venture. Susan and Robert Morrison, who'd attended my wedding and called me their dearest friend. None of them had visited me once in the nursing home. None of them had questioned Victor's story. They'd simply accepted that I was gone and moved on with their lives. At 2 o'clock, the auction began. I could hear the auctioneer's voice, crisp and professional, echoing through the hall. Lot number 1, a collection of Georgian silver, circa 1790. We'll start the bidding at $15,000. My grandmother's silver, the set she'd brought from England when she immigrated at 19 years old. Sold for $32,000 to paddle 47. Lot after lot, my possessions were sold. My mother's china, my father's first edition books, the antique desk where I'd written my first business plan, everything that held meaning, auctioned off to strangers who saw only objects, not memories. Victor stood at the front of the room, basking in the attention. He wasn't crying anymore. He'd dropped the grieving husband act. Now he was animated, excited, pointing out special features of various items to potential bidders. At 3:15, the auctioneer announced, "And now, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the crown jewel of today's event. Lot 73, the Wellington Estate." That was my cue. 2 staff members came to wheel me out. They positioned me in the back corner of the hall, exactly where Victor had planned. I could see everything from here. The stage, the projection screen showing photos of my home, Victor standing at the podium with that practiced expression of noble suffering. But what Victor couldn't see was Thomas Brennan, seated in row 12, paddle in hand, looking like just another wealthy buyer. What he couldn't see was Maria, standing in the back hallway, holding a garment bag. What he couldn't see was the camera crew Brennan had hired, disguised as the auction house's standard documentation team. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victor began, his voice heavy with false emotion. "This is not easy for me. The Wellington Estate has been our family home for 15 years. Every room holds memories, but circumstances have forced my hand." He gestured toward me in the wheelchair. "My beautiful wife, Elena, suffered a tragic accident 18 months ago. As you can see, she requires constant care. The medical expenses have been devastating. I've exhausted every option, pursued every treatment, but the doctors have confirmed that her condition is permanent. Liar, liar, liar. So with a heavy heart, I'm offering our home to ensure she receives the care she needs for as long as she needs it. This estate represents not just property, but love. And sometimes, love means making impossible choices." Several women in the audience dabbed at their eyes. Margaret Hartwell actually sniffled. The estate includes 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a fully renovated kitchen, Olympic swimming pool, tennis courts, and 3 acres of landscaped gardens, built in 1895, fully modernized and located in the most prestigious neighborhood in the city. Images flashed on the screen behind him. My garden in spring bloom, the library where I'd spent countless afternoons reading, the master bedroom where Victor had once promised to love me until death. "We'll start the bidding at $2.5 million. Paddles rose immediately. The price climbed quickly. $3 million, 3.2, 3.5. Victor's eyes gleamed. This was it. His moment of triumph. The culmination of 18 months of lies and theft and cruelty. A $4 million from paddle 21, 4.2 from paddle 68. I gripped the wheels of my chair. My moment was coming. I could feel it building like electricity in the air before a storm. Going once at 4.2 million? I pressed my feet flat against the footrests. Every muscle in my body tensed. Going twice. Maria appeared in my peripheral vision, moving silently through the back door. She was carrying the red dress. Victor raised the gavel, smiling at Carla, who stood near the stage, already counting the money in her mind. "Sold to..." I stood up. The wheelchair rolled backward with that metallic screech, exactly as I'd imagined it. The sound cut through the room like a blade. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Paddles froze in midair. 200 faces turned toward me in perfect, horrified synchronization. Victor's face drained of all color. The gavel slipped from his fingers and clattered on the podium, the sound impossibly loud in the sudden silence. Carla made a choking sound and stumbled backward, grabbing the edge of the stage for support. I took one step forward. My legs trembled, but they held. Months of 3 a.m. practice, months of secret torture, months of channeling rage into strength, all of it culminated in this moment. Another step. The crowd parted like water, people pulling their chairs back instinctively, creating a pathway down the center aisle. Margaret Hartwell's face was white as paper. David Chen's mouth hung open. The Morrisons clutched each other's hands. I walked slowly, deliberately, toward the stage. Each footfall echoed in the silence. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. They couldn't. They were witnessing a resurrection. Victor finally found his voice. "Elena, you can't," the doctor said. I reached the stage steps. Maria appeared beside me, draping the red dress over my shoulders like a cape, transforming me from victim to conqueror in a single gesture. I climbed the stairs one at a time, gripping the railing, my entire body shaking but refusing to stop. At the top, I faced the crowd. 200 people stared back at me like I was a ghost made flesh. Then I looked at Victor. Up close, I could see the sweat beading on his forehead, the panic in his eyes, the way his hands trembled as he tried to process what was happening. I reached out and took the microphone from his frozen grip. When I spoke, my voice was rough from disuse, but every word carried to the back of the hall. "The only vegetable in this room, Victor, is your brain if you think you're keeping my money." The silence shattered. People gasped. Someone screamed. Chairs scraped as audience members stood up for a better view. Victor's mouth opened and closed like a suffocating fish. "This isn't... You're supposed to be... brain dead?" I finished for him. "Vegetative? Incapable of understanding or responding? Yes, that's what you told everyone, isn't it?" I turned to face the crowd. "My husband tried to murder me 18 months ago. He drove my car off a cliff road, hoping the crash would kill me. When it didn't, when I survived but became trapped in my own body, he saw an opportunity." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Victor grabbed my arm. "You're confused. You're sick. You don't know what you're saying." I shook him off with more strength than he expected. "I know exactly what I'm saying. I've known everything for 18 months. I heard every word you spoke in my hospital room, every plan you made, every lie you told." Thomas Brennan stood up from his seat in row 12. "If I may address the room," he called out in his lawyer's voice, trained to command attention. "My name is Thomas Brennan, and I represent Mrs. Elena Wellington. I have in my possession medical documentation proving that Mrs. Wellington has been conscious and aware since 3 months after her accident. I also have video evidence of Mr. Wellington's activities during her incapacitation." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a tablet. "If someone could connect this to the projection system." The auction house tech, too shocked to question anything, rushed forward with a cable. Moments later, the screen behind me lit up with footage from my nursing home room. The timestamp showed it was from 2 weeks ago. On the screen, Victor sat beside my bed, holding papers. "I just need your fingerprint here, Elena," his recorded voice said. "Then the estate is mine to sell." The camera clearly showed him grabbing my hand, forcing my rigid fingers onto the ink pad, bribing the notary when the man expressed concerns. The audience watched in stunned silence. "I have 37 hours of footage like this," Brennan announced, including conversations where Mr. Wellington admits to causing Mrs. Wellington's accident, where he discusses spending her money with his mistress, where he mocks her condition and expresses relief that she can't stop him. Victor was backing away now, shaking his head. "This is insane. This is some kind of setup. Elena is brain damaged. She's confused. Someone is manipulating her." "I'm not confused," I said, my voice growing stronger. "I was trapped, locked in my own body while you dismantled my life piece by piece. You sold my mother's pearls, my grandmother's ring, my father's books. You moved me to a facility that cost $800 a month while claiming you were spending thousands on my care." I walked toward him. He backed away until he hit the wall behind the podium. "You brought your mistress to my bedside and planned your future together while I sat 5 feet away, unable to move, unable to speak, forced to listen to every word." Carla was trying to sneak toward the exit, but 2 security guards had already moved to block the doors. Brennan had thought of everything. "You thought my silence was permission," I continued. "You thought my stillness meant I didn't matter anymore. You forgot that I'm not just some object you can discard when I'm no longer useful to you." I was standing directly in front of him now, close enough to see the fear in his eyes. "I am Elena Marie Wellington. I built a fortune before I ever met you. I invested, I created, I grew wealth that you could never have earned on your own, and you tried to steal it all." Victor's legs gave out. He slid down the wall until he was sitting on the stage floor, his expensive suit crumpling around him. I was going to leave you, I said quietly, just for him. The divorce papers you found were real, but I hadn't filed them yet because part of me still loved you. Part of me wanted to believe we could fix things. Tears were streaming down his face now. Elena, please. You killed that love when you drove my car off that cliff. You buried it when you abandoned me in that nursing home. And you destroyed any chance of redemption when you sold my mother's pearls to buy your mistress a tennis bracelet. I straightened up and addressed the room again. This auction is canceled. This estate is not for sale. These are my possessions, my assets, my life, and I'm taking all of it back. Brennan stepped forward. I've already filed emergency injunctions freezing all of Mrs. Wellington's assets and contesting the power of attorney. As of 30 minutes ago, Mr. Wellington has no legal authority over any of his wife's property. The sound of sirens cut through the hall. Police were pulling up outside. Brennan had timed that perfectly too. Victor Wellington, I said, as two officers entered the hall. I'm pressing charges for attempted murder, fraud, elder abuse, and theft. And I have 18 months of evidence to prove every single count. The officers moved toward Victor. He didn't resist as they pulled him to his feet and handcuffed him. I loved you, he said, his voice breaking. I know I made mistakes, but I did love you once. I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing. No anger, no love, no hatred, just emptiness where he used to be. I know, I said. That's the saddest part of all of this. Once upon a time, our love was real, and you destroyed it for money you didn't even earn. They led him away. Carla was already in handcuffs near the exit, crying hysterically, mascara running down her face. The auction hall erupted in chaos. People were shouting questions, recording on their phones, demanding explanations. Margaret Hartwell was crying. David Chen looked like he might faint. I stood in the center of the stage, wrapped in my red dress, and let the noise wash over me. Maria appeared at my elbow, steadying me as my legs finally began to give out. You did it, Mija, she whispered. We did it, I corrected her. Brennan joined us on the stage. The police will need your statement, but I've already briefed them. They know you've been through hell. They'll be gentle. I nodded, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation was fading, leaving behind the reality of 18 months of trauma and pain. Can I go home? I asked. Brennan smiled. Your estate is yours again as of 20 minutes ago. You can go anywhere you want. I looked out at the crowd, at all those people who'd attended my funeral without knowing I was still alive to see it. Then I want to go home. The Wellington estate looked different in the late afternoon light. I'd spent 15 years here, built memories in every room, planted every flower in the gardens. But I'd never seen it through the eyes of someone who'd lost everything and clawed their way back. Maria drove me through the iron gates in her old Honda. Brennan had offered to arrange a car service. But I wanted this moment to be quiet, private, just the woman who'd saved my life and the home that had waited for me. The fountain in the circular driveway was still running. Victor hadn't bothered to turn it off. Why would he? He'd planned to sell it all anyway. Are you sure you don't want me to stay? Maria asked as she helped me out of the car. My legs were shaking again. The confrontation at the auction had depleted every reserve of strength I'd built over the past months. I need to do this alone, I said. But I'll call you tomorrow. We have a lot to discuss. She hugged me tightly. You're the strongest woman I've ever met, Mija. Remember that when the nightmares come. After she left, I stood in the driveway for a long moment, staring up at the house. The limestone facade glowed golden in the setting sun. The ivy I'd planted 10 years ago had spread across the eastern wall, exactly as I'd imagined it would. The second-floor window of my office was open, curtains drifting in the breeze. Someone had been here recently. Victor, probably, going through my things, deciding what to sell and what to keep. I climbed the front steps slowly, gripping the iron railing. My hands were still weak. My body was still broken in ways that might never fully heal. But I was home. The front door was unlocked. Of course it was. Victor had stopped thinking of this as my house months ago. Inside, everything was both familiar and foreign. The furniture was where I'd left it, but things were missing. The Rothko that had hung in the foyer was gone, leaving a pale rectangle on the wall. My mother's antique clock was missing from the mantel. The Persian rug in the living room had been rolled up and moved, probably already sold to a private buyer. I walked through the house slowly, cataloging the theft. The dining room chandelier, gone. The first edition Hemingways from my father's collection, gone. The jade sculpture I'd bought in Beijing, gone. But the bones of the house remained. The walls I'd painted, the floors I'd refinished, the garden I'd designed, visible through the French doors, still blooming despite months of neglect. I made my way upstairs to the master bedroom. The bed was unmade, sheets tangled, smelling like unfamiliar perfume. Carla had been sleeping here, in my bed, in my house, wearing my life like a costume. I stripped the sheets with trembling hands and threw them in the hallway. Then I opened every window, letting fresh air sweep through the room, clearing out the stench of betrayal. My closet was half empty. Carla had taken my clothes, my shoes, my jewelry boxes. What she'd left behind were the pieces I'd treasured most: my mother's wedding dress, my grandmother's fur coat, things with sentimental value but no resale price. She'd understood nothing about what mattered. I found one of my old dresses, a simple blue cotton shift, and changed out of the red dress that had armored me through the auction. My body was thin, wasted by months of immobility. The dress hung loose on my frame. I looked like a ghost of myself. But I was alive. I was home. I was free. I went to my office, the room where I'd built my business empire, managed my investments, planned my future. Victor's fingerprints were everywhere, papers scattered across my desk, my filing cabinets forced open, documents missing. My computer was gone, probably wiped and sold. But he'd missed the safe hidden behind the bookshelf. The combination lock was still secure. Inside, I found my passport, my backup financial documents, the original deed to this house that my father had signed over to me on my 25th birthday. And at the bottom, wrapped in velvet, my mother's pearl necklace. Victor had sold the one from my jewelry box, the replica I'd had made years ago for insurance purposes. But the real pearls, the ones my mother had worn on her wedding day, the ones she'd been wearing when she died, these had stayed hidden. I clutched them to my chest and finally, after 18 months of silent suffering, I cried. Not quiet tears, not dignified grief. I sobbed like a child, sitting on the floor of my office, holding the only piece of my mother I had left, and let 18 months of horror pour out of me. I cried for the woman I'd been before the accident, confident and strong and naive enough to believe that love could conquer anything. I cried for the months I'd spent trapped in my body, helpless and voiceless, while the man I'd trusted destroyed everything I'd built. I cried for the future I'd imagined with Victor, the children we'd talked about having, the old age we'd planned to spend together, all of it revealed as lies. And I cried for the version of myself I'd never get back, the one who hadn't learned that the people you love most can become the monsters you fear. When the tears finally stopped, it was dark outside. The house was silent except for the ticking of a clock somewhere downstairs, one Victor hadn't managed to sell yet. I pulled myself up using the desk and looked out the window at the gardens. Even in the darkness, I could see the shapes of the roses I'd planted, the fountain where I'd scattered my father's ashes, the stone bench where Victor had proposed. This house held so much pain now. But it also held every good memory I had. My parents' laughter, my father teaching me about investments in this very office, my mother showing me how to arrange flowers in the conservatory, the dinner parties where I'd felt powerful and loved and surrounded by community. Victor had tried to erase all of that. He'd tried to erase me, but I was still here. My phone rang. It was Brennan. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "I'm home," I said. "And that's enough for now. The police want to interview you tomorrow, but I told them you need time to recover. I've scheduled it for next week. Thank you. There's something else you should know. The media has the story. By tomorrow morning, you'll be international news. The woman who came back from the dead to stop her husband from stealing her fortune, they're calling it the resurrection of the year." I closed my eyes. Of course. In the age of smartphones and social media, nothing stayed private. I can handle the press inquiries if you want, Brennan continued. Set up a statement, manage the narrative. No, I said. Let them talk, let them know what happened. Maybe my story will help someone else recognize the signs before it's too late. After I hung up, I went downstairs to the kitchen. The refrigerator was empty except for champagne and takeout containers. I threw the containers away and opened the champagne. It was the same brand Victor had ordered on our last anniversary, the night before he'd tried to kill me. I poured a glass and raised it to the empty kitchen. To survival, I said out loud. To strength, to refusing to disappear just because someone wants you gone. I drank deeply, feeling the bubbles burn down my throat. Then I picked up my phone and called Maria. Change of plans, I said when she answered. I do need you to come back and bring your things. I have a proposition for you. She arrived an hour later with a suitcase and a confused expression. I want to turn this estate into a recovery center, I told her, for people like me, people trapped in their bodies, people the medical system has given up on, people who need someone to believe they're still in there fighting. Maria's eyes widened. Elena, that's ambitious, I know, and expensive. But I have the money now. Victor didn't manage to steal everything, and Brennan is recovering the rest. This house is too big for one person anyway. It should serve a purpose. What about you? Where will you live? Here. I'll convert the West Wing into my private quarters. The rest of the house becomes the center. We'll need to renovate, add medical equipment, hire staff. I want you to run it. Me? You saved my life, Maria. You saw me when everyone else saw nothing. You're exactly who should be leading this. She sat down heavily in one of the kitchen chairs. I'm just a nurse. I don't know how to run a whole facility. Neither did I when I started my first business, but I learned, and so will you. I'll handle the administrative side, the funding, the logistics. You handle the medical protocols, the patient care, the soul of the operation. Maria was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, tears streaming down her face. What are you going to call it? I looked around the kitchen, at the house that had witnessed both my happiest moments and my darkest hours. The Elena Wellington Center for Locked-In Syndrome Recovery, I said, because people need to know that being trapped doesn't mean being gone, that silence doesn't equal absence, that you can come back from the dead if you're stubborn enough. Over the next 3 months, I rebuilt my life piece by piece. The criminal trial against Victor was scheduled for the following spring. Brennan said it was an open and shut case. The video evidence alone was damning, but combined with medical records, financial documents, and testimony from the nursing home staff, Victor didn't stand a chance. Carla had taken a plea deal, agreeing to testify against Victor in exchange for reduced charges. She'd sent me a letter apologizing, but I'd burned it without reading it. Some apologies didn't deserve acknowledgement. The nursing home where I'd been kept, Shad Riverside Extended Care, was shut down by the state health department after my case brought scrutiny to their practices. The owners were facing criminal charges for neglect and fraud, but not all the staff there had been complicit. Some, like Maria, had been doing their best in an impossible situation. I'd hired 3 of them for the Wellington Center. The renovations began in January. We converted the ground floor into patient rooms, each one private and bright, with large windows overlooking the gardens. We installed state-of-the-art medical equipment, hired the best physical therapists and occupational therapists in the state, and created protocols based on the techniques Maria had used to help me recover. Our first patient arrived in March. Her name was Sarah, a 42-year-old woman who'd suffered a stroke and been written off as vegetative by her doctors. Her family had been told to consider end-of-life care. But her daughter had read about my story and begged us to evaluate Sarah. It took Maria 3 days to confirm what the daughter suspected. Sarah was conscious, trapped, aware of everything. We began treatment immediately. 6 weeks later, Sarah blinked her eyes in response to questions. 3 months later, she moved her hand. By summer, she was walking with assistance. Her doctors called it a miracle. We called it refusing to give up. By the end of the year, we had 12 patients, each one written off by the medical establishment, each one fighting their way back to life with our help. The center became famous. Medical journals published articles about our success rates. Neurologists came to study our methods. Families from across the country called, desperate, hopeful, begging for a chance. We expanded into the East Wing. Then we bought the property next door and expanded again. And I found purpose in the ruins of my old life. On the first anniversary of the auction, I stood in the gardens with Maria, watching our patients work with their therapists on the lawn. Sarah was walking independently now, relearning how to speak. A new patient, Michael, had just moved his toes for the first time in 8 months. A teenage girl named Emma was communicating through eye movements, planning her return to school. "You did this," Maria said quietly. "You turned your pain into something beautiful." "We did this," I corrected her. "I just provided the house and the funding. You provided the hope." That evening, I drove to the county jail where Victor was being held pending trial. I'd avoided seeing him since the auction, but Brennan thought it might be cathartic to face him one last time before the trial began. They brought him into the visitation room in an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed. He'd lost weight. His hair was graying. He looked older than his 42 years. He sat down across from me, separated by thick glass. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. "You won," he said finally. His voice through the phone sounded hollow, defeated. "You got everything, the house, the money, the moral high ground. I hope it makes you happy." "It doesn't make me happy," I said, "but it makes me whole." "There's a difference." "The prosecutor says I'm looking at 20 years minimum. 20 years, Elena. My life is over. You tried to kill me. You stole from me. You tortured me for 18 months. 20 years seems fair." His eyes filled with tears. "I know you won't believe this, but I am sorry. Not for getting caught. I'm sorry for what I did, for what I became. Somewhere along the way, I turned into someone I don't recognize. You turned into someone who valued money more than humanity. That's who you always were, Victor. I just didn't want to see it. Are you going to testify at the trial?" "Yes, every word. Every moment you thought I was too broken to remember." He nodded slowly. "I deserve that. You deserve worse than that. But our justice system has limits." I stood up to leave. "Elena," he called out. "One more thing. That last night, before the accident, when you were sleeping, I almost didn't go through with it. I stood over you with a pillow, thinking about smothering you instead of the car crash, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't kill you while you were looking so peaceful." I stared at him through the glass. "This stranger who used to be my husband. So you drove us off a cliff instead. How merciful of you." "I'm trying to say that some part of me still loved you, even then." Love doesn't try to murder people, Victor. Whatever you felt, it wasn't love. It was possession. It was ownership. It was the rage of a man who couldn't accept that his wife was leaving him. I know that now. I hung up the phone without saying goodbye. I didn't need his apology. I didn't need his regret. I didn't need anything from him anymore. On my way out of the jail, I passed a bulletin board with community announcements. Someone had posted an article about the Wellington Center with a photo of me cutting the ribbon at our grand opening. The headline read, "From Victim to Victor, How Elena Wellington Rose from the Ashes." I smiled at the wordplay. Victor to Victor. The man who'd tried to destroy me had inadvertently given me the greatest gift of all. He'd shown me exactly how strong I could become when I had no choice but to fight. 6 months later, Victor was sentenced to 25 years in prison for attempted murder, fraud, elder abuse, and a dozen other charges. I attended the sentencing but didn't make a statement. I didn't need to. My survival was statement enough. Carla received 5 years for conspiracy and fraud. She'd served 3 with good behavior. The nursing home owners received 7 years each. Justice, imperfect but present. I stood outside the courthouse afterward, surrounded by reporters asking how I felt. "I feel free," I told them. For 18 months, I was imprisoned in my own body. Then I was imprisoned by the need for revenge, for justice, for validation. Now, for the first time since the accident, I'm free to just live. "What's next for you?" someone called out. I thought about the 12 patients at the center, each one fighting their way back. I thought about the families who called every day, desperate for hope. I thought about Sarah, who was graduating from physical therapy next week. I thought about Maria, who'd just been awarded a grant to expand our research into locked-in syndrome. What's next is I keep helping people who everyone else has given up on, because I know what it's like to be written off as hopeless, and I know what it's like to prove everyone wrong. That night, I returned to the estate and walked through the halls of the center. It was late, after visiting hours, but I could hear the sounds of life everywhere. Monitors beeping, nurses chatting quietly, the hum of medical equipment keeping people alive while they fought to come back. I stopped outside Sarah's room. She was asleep, but her daughter sat beside her, holding her hand, reading aloud from a mystery novel. The same thing Maria had done for me. In the next room, Michael's wife was showing him photos of their children, pointing to each one, telling him stories, keeping his mind engaged even though his body couldn't respond yet. Down the hall, Emma's mother was playing her daughter's favorite music, believing that somewhere inside that unresponsive body, Emma could hear and remember and feel loved. This was my legacy now, not the fortune I'd built, not the revenge I'd taken, but this, the refusal to let people disappear just because they couldn't speak. The insistence that consciousness mattered, even when trapped. The stubborn, furious, beautiful act of believing in resurrection when everyone else saw only death. I went to my private quarters and stood at the window overlooking the gardens. The fountain where my father's ashes rested was lit up at night, water cascading over stone, constant and eternal. I touched my mother's pearls, which I wore every day now. I did it. I whispered to the ghosts of my parents, to the memory of the woman I used to be, to the future I was building from the ruins. He tried to bury me, but I dug my way out, and I used that grave to plant a garden. The last words Victor had said to me at the auction echoed in my mind. I cared for you. And my response, the truth that had set me free. You buried me alive. I just dug my way out. But that wasn't the end of the story. That was just the beginning. Because the greatest revenge isn't destruction, it's transformation. It's taking the worst thing that ever happened to you and using it to create something beautiful. Victor had tried to erase me. Instead, he'd given me a reason to become unforgettable. And as I stood in my home, surrounded by people fighting to reclaim their lives, I realized something profound. He thought my silence was weakness. He forgot that it's in silence that we arm the greatest storms. But storms don't just destroy. They also clear away the debris, wash the world clean, and make room for new growth. I was the storm, and I had just begun to bloom.